Kia ora and welcome to another episode of the Holistic Human Podcast. Ko Amanda tuku ingoa. My name is Amanda and today I'm talking to Olivia Pepper, writer, star poet and eclectic magician. I'm also talking to Charlie Cross, an anthroposophical student at Dornach Switzerland, astrologer and ultimate frisbee athlete. Please like, subscribe and share and comment wherever you're listening or watching, and please share on social media sites because that's a free way you can support the podcast and keep it going. So I asked them on the show because they're both super inspirational and share lots of really interesting insights into the stars. And I also saw that they're writing a book together on the being planet Mercury. Which, as they go on to explain in the podcast, is actually the beginning of a series of books, which I'm really excited about. They're also offering courses in line with the book. So the next they did a Mercury retrograde, like a course during the last Mercury retrograde. And they'll be doing another one in September when Mercury goes into retrograde again, and then possibly a course about Venus when Venus goes into retrograde in December. So they're just kind of wanting to explore the being of Mercury and I'll let them explain it to you in the podcast. And the whole podcast had a very mercurial structure. So the number associated with Mercury is 3. There were 3 of us in 3 different time zones. The chat was recorded in 3 segments because I don't have the professional version of Zoom. And there was just a lively, fun, sparkly vibe around it. It just felt very mercurial. So we begin by listening to Olivia and Charlie talk about their upbringing and what brought them together and why they've been working together since then, and what they've been doing. And due to them being so immersed in star wisdom, it's kind of just sprinkled throughout the conversation. And we go into it a bit deeper in the second half, but it's quite interesting because although they're talking about their upbringing and stuff at the beginning part of the podcast or the first section, there's a whole lot of stuff that kind of comes out of that related to star wisdom and mysticism and the paranormal. Very cool. I have to apologize too, because for the first half an hour, Charlie's mic is a bit rustly sometimes. When we were recording it, to me, it didn't sound that off, but he fixed it halfway through, and for the rest of the podcast it's fine. But then when I was post-production editing it, I was like, oh, this could annoy some people. So just be aware that there's a bit of a rustle with Charlie for the first half, but it goes away, and Olivia's audio and my audio is fine, and it's worth sticking with it because it's a really good conversation. And if you want to support the podcast financially, you can so by going to my Buy Me a Coffee page, and I'll put the link in the show notes. And all funds gifted to me there go towards paying for the web hosting stuff and my internet bill, and anything left over goes towards raising my small child, and it's all very much appreciated. Even people that have been donating like $5 and stuff, like it makes a big difference. So thank you so much. Without further ado, let's get into it. Links to Olivia and Charlie's Instagram page and such will be posted below, and go follow them, check them out, sign up for their course and buy their books because they're awesome humans. And I'm sure you'll grow to like them just as much as I did after this podcast. Enjoy. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, ti hei Māori ora. And in English, that is, cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Let the breeze blow over the land. Let the red-tipped dawn come with sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day. And it's a verse we use to kind of unite peoples that are coming together for a hui or a meeting, which is what we're doing. We're bringing our ancestors and our guides with us. Yeah.
Indeed.
Cool. So welcome to the Holistic Human Podcast, Charlie and Olivia. I'm so grateful to have you both here in the first 3-person interview. Pretty significant. So I thought we could just tell our listeners where we are in place and time. And if you're watching the video, it's interesting how we're lit as well. We're quite lit in quite different ways. So I'm on the Kapiti coast in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it's the morning time here. And Olivia, where are you?
I am a guest on unceded Taos land. It's Tiwa Pueblo territory, and it is in Taos, New Mexico. So it is mid-afternoon, about coming on 3:30 p.m. for me.
Nice. Charlie?
I am in Dornach, Switzerland, just down the hill from the Gertianum, and it is 11:25 p.m.
Oh, so late.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind staying up so late. If that was me, I'd be like, ugh.
I think I'm going to be able to make it through.
Okay, very good. So I've kind of divided our little chat into 2 parts because you're both here to talk about a project that you've been working on together. And I'll just tell the guests, the reason that I've asked you both on is one, I've been following Charlie on Instagram for a while. Like I was telling Olivia before, I was just hashtag searching astrosophy, and his was one of the few accounts that actually used that hashtag. And I started following what Charlie was up to, and his posts are really on point and wise. And I've been learning a lot following him for the past year or so. I'm not sure. And then I saw Charlie posting about a course and a book that he was writing with somebody called Olivia. And I thought, oh, I don't know that person, and started following Olivia. And their page is, again, wise and interesting and thought-provoking. And so I thought, well, we better have a chat because these two are doing cool stuff. And so we're going to just divide our chat into 2 parts. So we're going to talk about Charlie and Olivia's life biographies a little bit, so we get to know about these 2 interesting people. And then the second part, we're going to chat more about their project that they're doing together, what work they're up to, and what the book's going to be about, and what amazing course you could possibly do with them if you've got them coming up in the future. I'm not sure.
We do.
You do? Cool. Okay, good. Well, we'll get to that. But to begin with, so we know where we are. We're in at the 3 triangular points of the Earth. Maybe it'd be interesting to look at a map and see what we look like. But anyway, what I was going to ask, I feel like I might flip this around and oh no. Well, I just wanted to know how you 2 met each other first. How did this connection occur?
Well, I can tell my portion of it, and then maybe Charlie can fill in. I lived for some time in Austin, Texas, and I had moved away from the city, I think by the time that Charlie arrived there, but I had left some functioning institutions, including this storytelling circle that met every full moon. And there was a lot of conversation about how Charlie and I should meet, and we would really like each other. A lot of our mutual friends were really recommending Charlie to me. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of by happenstance, like I had this idea, like, oh, we would get to know each other more and get to know each other better. I think we might have met in passing before this happened, but I hosted a party to celebrate the ingress of Uranus into the sign of Taurus, which was in May of 2018. And I asked another astrologer or astrology aficionado, I don't really know if she actually practices or not, but somebody who I knew followed the stars and was very creative. I asked her if she would dance because she's a very avid dancer. And then she brought in Charlie as her partner for this improvised, intuitive, Uranian inspired dance cycle that was performed in the midst of a thunderstorm outside at my
love it.
So it was very appropriate to Uranus and Uranian energies. And yeah, that's where Charlie arrived in my life. And it was very appropriate. And I loved it very much.
Cool.
Chelsea, our friend and I, Chelsea Hunter, who is a practicing astrologer, she works on Sanctuary with me. We were also wearing gold paint on our skin. Yeah,
that's an important detail to add into there.
One of the that was a really remarkable party. Yeah, my gosh, storytelling, music, and I actually helped run that storytelling circle for a while. So that was called Moon Language Story Circle, and I guess it's mostly quiet now. We had a few online sessions during when COVID was starting, but just didn't quite have the gumption to keep it going. I was gonna try to do it from Switzerland, but it entailed staying up till like 3 or 4, and that didn't work out. Yeah, and I guess I took a class with Olivia, the Rainbow Serpent Dreaming Society class in winter of 2018.
Yeah,
it must have been.
Yeah.
And just felt really. I mean, I just in general felt really called to work with Olivia. I remember this one time where I was in class at the Waldorf school where I was working, and you know it was often just a really wonderful like meditative environment, like floating from kid to kid, like keeping an eye on what's going on, but also having a lot of sort of silent time to myself out on the playground or what have you. And I remember having a lot of sort of like internal questions about who I should be working with and studying with, and having at one moment really clearly of like Olivia, like work with Olivia. Yeah, and then last year I was running an intensive of going through each of the signs of the zodiac and doing a class on each of them, weaving anthroposophical perspectives from Steiner and working with the eurythmy movements and the soul calendar or the soul mood verses, and my own explorations into embodied astrology and meditations with astrology. And yeah, so through the month of April, we went through each of the signs. So it was a total of 12 or 13 classes. And Olivia joined for the ride and was always not just like a student, but they would always have something like profound and necessary to complement my perspectives. And it sort of just turned into this nice back and forth sometimes where it was clear that we were sort of like teaching together, and so that was taking place while I was here at the Goetheanum, and I came here in large part to get a sense of Steiner's perspective on the stars, because I was so dissatisfied with what I felt was available to me in the astrological milieu at the time. And through that process of developing my thoughts about and learning about star wisdom and its relationship to astrology, I really found Olivia and their approach to astrology through what they call star poetry to be really pretty much on point of what I was like trying to like searching after. And so I'm sure we'll explain that a good bit more today.
Yeah. Cool. Wow. Very fortuitous meeting. Seems like you two are kind of, there's that you've got your soul group. It seems like you two are part of the soul group, eh? Hey, what was that storytelling group you were part of? Just side note, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. So let's see. I started Moon Language Story Circle in Austin, Texas in 2010, because it was 10 years last year. And I mean, basically it was kind of like, it was really connected with my principles of Indigenous futurism, which is like thinking about the ways that communal and societal structures can be informed by Indigenous tradition and how it can benefit everyone. So the community that I was part of in Austin was very artistic and very like avant-garde or alternative, lots of musicians, poets, artists. And I definitely noticed that there was a kind of a shortage of spaces that were like gathering places, but that were appropriate for all ages of people and were accessible to people of different ability levels. And I really wanted to start something that felt less cliquey and more like authentically communal. And one of the things that I have always loved about Indigenous folkways is the very long-standing tradition of getting together under full moons to observe stories and songs about the world around us. And so I started hosting them in August of 2010 in a friend's backyard, and then it became this this regular tradition where it would be every single full moon. It would happen on different nights of the week because I would calculate out when the full moon was actually, when it was closest to full. So we would meet in a different person's backyard in and around Austin, Texas, every full moon. They were always free. They were always potlucks, and everybody was invited to bring a story or a presentation or a song that was within a particular theme that was around the moon. Nice. So when I moved away from Austin in 2015, a bunch of people kept it going. And Charlie was one of the people who kind of came into folks who were carrying on that story circle after I left. They continued happening very regularly until the pandemic shut down. And as Charlie said, I did host a couple online, but it's never been something that's intended to be online. Yeah. I hosted them online as a sort of like, I guess, a balm to soothe all of our hearts, but it's something that is actually intended to be happening in various communities, hopefully all over the world. There have been chapters in Los Angeles, Chicago. For a while, there was one in Edinburgh, in Scotland, and there was one in Salt Lake City. People who loved the community just like took it to various places and started having it. And eventually I'll host one here when it's safe for people to gather in large groups.
Nice. How wonderful. That sounds really nice. Cool. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that a lot of people are inspired by that. I am myself, actually. Really cool.
Yeah, please start a moon language chapter anywhere that you want.
Yeah. Because you're right. There are quite a lot of full moon things that I've been to a few, but they've never quite been my vibe. And it's no shade on the people that do it or anything. It's fine, but it does seem to be a little bit cliquey sometimes, or just again not the same kind of value system or something that I have. And so it's good to remember that you can start your own things for people with, your own worldview, but while also being open to others. Yeah. And I really like that thing of just being like, being so open that it's for people of all abilities and capacities and worldviews and things like that, and making an effort to kind of connect with everybody there, not just your little group. Anyway, cool. Good job, guys. Right. Shall we move on to childhood?
Sure.
Let's go to childhood. I think it's always a nice picture for you to share what you wish, of course, about your childhood. It kind of informs who you are now, of course. So who wants to start with a little biography of where you grew up and what your education was like or family was like? Who wants to go first?
Oh, Charlie, you go first. My childhood, as you know, is fairly bizarre. So we'll just set it off to the side.
Start with the normal one. So I grew up in San Antonio on native Payaya land. And I guess I had a somewhat unique childhood in that I went to an all-boys military school from ages 4 to 14, and also an all-boys camp. And I was even involved as a counselor there through part of my 20s. And so a very like sort of regimented, privileged environment, excellence-oriented, and sort of strange in that there was this strongly gendered, understanding of the human being yeah, that's been something that I've had to sort of figure out for myself, especially in high school and afterwards. Understanding gender has been a path as a part of that. But I did have a really wonderful childhood in the sense of a lot of outstanding role models and community experiences that I was a part of. I also grew up in the Presbyterian Church. I saw that you said your father was a pastor?
Yeah, he is. He became one when I moved to live with my mum when I was a teenager. His midlife crisis was becoming a Presbyterian minister, going from physics teacher to that, which is it's fine.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, my mother, I've heard her say that she probably would have been a minister had she had female role models as ministers, but instead basically got involved with the administration and even politics behind the Presbyterian Church, and so she was involved with their General Assembly and so forth. And we had a lot of really great ministers, and they gave me the opportunity to decide to be baptized by myself, and got baptized on the banks of the Guadalupe River when I was 8 or 9 after having they'd seen me closing my eyes during worship, during singing during worship, and they were like, "Okay, do you want to get baptized?" And so I did. So yeah, I had a healthy community and spiritual life growing up, even if it wasn't what I eventually needed. I had to sort of break with that tradition, starting in sort of mid-late high school during the Obama election in 2008. I had sort of inherited all my parents' beliefs about politics or religion, and sort of had this break where I recognized that I needed to think for myself, and stopped going to church and decided to question my spirituality, and that kind of simmered until college, when I had an initiatory healing wound. I tore my sartorius muscle, which is the longest muscle in the body. It runs from the inside of your knee to the back of your hip, around your hip to the back of your hip. Yeah. And so I was in this sort of mysterious shifting discomfort and pain for about 1.5 years. And during that time, I was questioning seriously and reading seriously and meditating and doing yoga and just feeling very deeply. And that's when I decided to be a religion major, and started studying, Steiner, and getting interested in esoterica. I found astrology on the tail end of that. And feel like today I'm 1,000,000 miles away from where I started, although there's definitely lots of threads of continuity as well. So that was my childhood, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah.
Adolescence.
Thank you for that picture. Very cool.
I was born in a cabin that my father built with no running water and no electricity in southern Oregon. And both of my parents are anarchists. They're from very different backgrounds. My father is from the East Coast. The tribe that he's partially extracted from is from Nova Scotia, Canada, and the state known as Maine, colonially. So he grew up there in Maine, and he was exposed to various kind of like belief systems coming up. His family struggled with a lot of like alcoholism and difficulty, and so he kind of broke away from them after naval service. He became a biker and kind of involved in some like criminal underworlds and very Scorpio. And he eventually made his way across the country on a motorcycle, and met my mom in Olympia, Washington. She had left this wealthy industrialist family in the Midwest in the state of Kansas, and had gone to the West Coast to like live a wild and free lifestyle. Like she was very much rebelling against sort of these repressive, very waspy ethics of the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of them met and had a brief but passionate relationship. Well, it actually, they were together for 13 years, so it wasn't as brief as it could have been, but they, I think were very in love with each other very quickly, and then had kids together, and then tried to make it work, and eventually it didn't. But I was born in this cabin that my father built, and then I was never sent to public school. My parents were very into the idea of anarchist education and the idea that kids could inform themselves and learn on our own at our own pace. So this is something that I think was both really, really beneficial to me and in some ways challenging. Part of the reason it was beneficial was because I had a very early interest in all sorts of medicine forms, like traditional ancestral forms of healing and spiritual work. And then also I was very interested in astrology and in tarot, which is a hereditary tradition on my dad's Irish side. And so I started learning tarot cards when I was 6. I did cast my first star charts with my first mentor, Patrick, when I was probably 8 or 9. And so I was able to study a lot of these things from a very young age. Of course, when my family moved into town after my parents' divorce, I didn't sit very well with the other kids. I was not well received by the children. And I really struggled with being like this very serious person who had participated in, after my parents' divorce, our house was a commune for a little while at my mom's sort of like insistence or desire. Of course, it was difficult to manage, and after a couple of years, it broke up, and my mom moved into a house in town and continued to do politically radical things, but in a more sort of centered and manageable way. But I had been participating in like community meetings about what we did with the garden and our agricultural decisions as a large group, and I had been reading these very advanced books about political history and anti-racism, and this is like when I'm 9 years old. My first political activism that I was involved with was the Grey Panthers, which is an anti-ageism organization. So there was an elder in my community who was participating with Grey Panthers, and I was 8 years old and very concerned about being discriminated against as a child. And this person decided that it was apropos for me to learn about the Grey Panthers and what they were doing. So I've always been very politically involved and very kind of, I guess, iconoclastic, even not necessarily voluntarily. Like I didn't know how weird I was until I moved into town at the age of 12. So I found out that I did not have a place in modern society, and for a while it was very painful and difficult, but eventually I kind of just carved out my own way by being myself. So that's where I come from.
Wow. So when you moved into the city, did you keep being homeschooled, self-taught, or did you go to so you didn't go to any formal education?
No, never. The only formal education that I've technically had is I have attended several college level courses, and all of them because I don't even have a general equivalency diploma or a GED. I could have got one, but I just didn't want to. And I've attended these classes by writing to the professors or going to their office hours and just saying, I'm really interested in what you're doing and I would like to come and sit in. And they've always said yes. So I've attended classes at Harvard University and like all manner of places. And I've taught classes at a university level, which is strange because I've never been enrolled in any university. So.
Well, that's going into the next question of us kind of sliding into what you did after school, but for you, maybe after 18 is probably the pertinent question.
Yeah. Well, I became a reporter for newspapers at a young age. I was accepted onto the youth section of the local newspaper, which published once a week when I think I was 15. But then I just continued working in newspapers. So by the time I was 16 or 17, I was writing as a freelance reporter for various newspapers and magazines. And I worked in newspapers for a bit of time, but it was I turned 18 in the year 2000. And so that was right when print papers were really like getting decimated. Early 2000s was a very hard time for print journalism. So I acquired a few jobs and immediately got laid off from them because I was the youngest member of the staff always. So at the same time, I was also developing a lot of my more adult impression of activism, which I was very focused on prison abolition and anti-war efforts at that time, because those were two things that I was seeing around me that were becoming vastly sort of out of control. So I was doing a lot of organizing and a lot of effort. And I kind of just moved around to different cities. I lived in Denver, I lived in Philadelphia, I lived in the Bay Area for a few years, I lived in New York a bit. Like I just was kind of all over the place, making zines and doing freelance reporting and participating in kind of public art. This was a time in my life when I was a bit more distant from some of my spiritual pursuits, or at least I was keeping it a little bit of a secret, because I was it was clear to me that I didn't quite integrate with like white mainstream spiritual communities. Strangely, I found a lot of simpatico with like actual Catholics, and actually a lot of Presbyterians and Episcopalians very involved in like activism and outreach to the poor. And I found a lot of them when I was doing things like reporting in Oaxaca, Mexico about the teachers' strike, or reporting in the Bay Area about issues of houselessness and people being evicted. There were always a lot of like priests around me. And yeah, so I kind of kept my own spiritual background and practices a little obscure, maybe out of some embarrassment, maybe just out of a sense of privacy. But eventually it kind of became clear to me that that was a really important part of my life. I realized that I was often providing kind of spiritual succor or support for people in grief or trauma. And so I became interested in applying that more. And I studied herbalism officially when it was 2012, when I graduated from an herbalism program in Austin. And I went through a few other things too, like providing trauma-informed care, some standing up for racial justice trainings, various sort of activism-oriented education, so that I could be in better service to my communities.
Nice. What a rich life you've lived so far.
So far, yeah.
Yeah. Good on you. Charlie, do you want to tell us how you got to Dornach?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to college in Northfield, Minnesota, a small liberal arts school called Carleton College, and yeah, that was first time away from Texas, first real independence that I had after having grown up in a really sheltered environment, and even after that, I felt the need to sort of break free and be independent, and so afterwards, I just sort of nomaded around the West Coast, living out of my car and in different communities and meditation centers and farms. Yeah, and eventually sort of crash landed in Austin, as I say, like just ran out of money and didn't really. I was clear that I wanted to work with astrology. That actually became very clear to me pretty quickly after encountering astrology. I had just such an easy, fast resonance with it, and such positive feedback from other people that I wanted to read for. Yeah, and so for the couple of years after encountering astrology, I was reading for whoever I could and studying with whoever I could, and that was sort of my game plan, is just become an astrologer, which I didn't exactly know what that meant.
Oh, kitty.
And so yeah, and I got to Austin and also started working in a gym, in a gymnastics gym, and I eventually got pulled into the Austin Waldorf School. Yeah, also pedicabbing and working a lot of odd jobs, doing design work and editing work, and yeah, as many astrology readings as I could. And yeah, eventually I got involved with the Astrological Society of Austin and started teaching through them, and started gaining more of a presence in Austin as a member of the astrological community and a resource there. And yeah, really the sort of twist of fate that brought me to Dornach is that I really felt clear that I wasn't feeling extremely challenged in my position as a assistant at the Waldorf School. And I also encountered this job where I've been working with the app called Sanctuary for the last 2 years, which is a sort of startup astrology and tarot and psychic app. And so they were just doing an event in Austin at South by Southwest and pulled me on to do readings for them, and eventually got me involved with the app. And I was helping develop the back end of the app, writing a lot of content for their astrology chart explorer and in different partnerships that they had. And so that was the sort of like resources that enabled me to get to Dornach. And yeah, I came here because I fell in love with the world of anthroposophy through my time at the Waldorf School. I just found it so nourishing to be in that environment, and so rich and nuanced and complex the way the teachers understood their work and related to the children and related to each other. And I spent some time with the Anthroposophical Society in Austin in the Dallas branch, and got exposed to all the really rich initiatives that are part of anthroposophy. And yeah, I got exposed to artistic impulses and felt really touched by the Lazur wall paintings that I saw. And they had a couple pieces by Charles Andrade, who's a wonderful painter in the anthroposophical tradition. More Liane de Colleaubois. I never know how to say her name. Yeah, and so I felt really called. Really touched. And I also recognized that multiple different parts of myself would be nourished in being here. I could study or follow up questions about politics and economics and meditation and esoterics and social and community life. And so I enrolled in the Anthroposophical Studies here program here with all the members of the School of Spiritual Science. The heads of the different departments are the teachers of that program, and we had students from all over the world and all walks of life and all ages, and just a really wonderful learning environment. And yeah, it's been incredibly nourishing to have been on this adventure, and to be, yeah, I mean, especially as an American, which I feel, even though there are elements of the culture that are quite diverse, the sort of internationality or the cosmopolitan nature of it pales in comparison to what's present in Europe. And so it's been a real education to be around so many different languages and people from so many different cultures and backgrounds, and to get a context on where I came from. Yeah, and so I'll probably be here another year or so. After finishing the program at the School of Spiritual Science, I enrolled in a painting school, which is another passion of mine. Painting school. So you might know, you might know Gerard Wagner. Yeah, and so this is his school, or the continuity of his school. Yeah, and so there's a very specific sort of approach to working with color, watercolors specifically, that aligned very closely with my ordinary approach to watercolor. And so it's been really wonderful. Yeah. So that's my student visa gig here.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing what you've been up to. I think we've got a good picture there. I have like a funny question because I'm always interested in it. But have you ever had anything weird or wonderful happen to you that seemed like paranormal or UFO-y? I say spiritual, but you kind of know what I mean. If you want to share.
I participated in like exorcisms, so that counts.
It certainly counts. Far
some
out.
of my training in some of the spiritual forms that I carry has actually involved like expelling of harmful spirits from the body. So I have seen some things that would make most people's toes curl, probably. Very scary, very strange, very inexplicable by sort of modern sciences, I suppose. And I've been also, when I was a teenager, I was a psychic intuitive for a ghost hunting team.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
So that was funny and strange. I mean, I've been around things like this for my whole life, probably. I mean, I always was like seeing ghosts, interacting with ghosts as a kid. I have a very stacked 12th house in my astrological presentation. And so
What's
I think
the 12th house about for people who might not know?
Yeah, the 12th house. I mean, I would describe it as the house that rules maybe mysticism and things that are difficult and unwieldy and kind of unseen, and the concept of death and dissolution. And and I have quite a few planets there. So
I see.
Yeah,
The realm
Charlie,
of dreams and
dreams, yes.
Yeah, the other worlds, basically.
Yeah. So those boundaries have always been a bit permeable for me, and I've been lucky enough to have teachers and people who could help structure that a bit so that I didn't just go completely mad. Which is always a possibility. But I think, let's see, things that some of them I'm like superstitious to even say, especially
you have to be careful about these things, what you say.
For sure. But I think something that I can share that I feel good about sharing is, well, very frequently, this happens very commonly actually. I have a really well-established dreaming practice, and I am connected with a lot of indigenous dream traditions from multiple ancestral lines in my family. And very frequently I will have dreams of dead people conveying messages to me for living people that I know. So it'll just be like, somebody will say, like the thing that I'm thinking of is a few years ago, I had this dream where a character in my dream who I had never seen before used the full name of my hairdresser, who I did not know very well, and just said, "Do you know this person?" and gave me their full name, and then said, and I said, "Yes, I do." And then she said, "Please tell him that I very much want for him to have the seashell lamp." And I had no idea. I didn't know this person very well at all. And when I went to my hair appointment next, I shared this with him, and he went, sort of pale, and said that his mom had recently passed away and that she had this large lamp made out of a seashell that had been next to her bed that was made out of like a conch shell. And they were about to do this whole go into the house and take what you want bereavement. So he took the seashell lamp at her request. It's nothing really like too out of the ordinary. Like, it's very simple and there was nothing more to it than that, but still, I carry messages for the dead. So I guess that's something otherworldly.
I think sometimes we get lost in, like, if we're communicating with the spiritual world, every communication has to be this big, profound enlightenment moment. And I think it feels more real or integrated when it's just, you're actually just genuinely having a conversation with people who have passed on. They're actually just like, oh, I must get in touch with that person and tell them he needs the seashell lamp. Like, that feels more real to me than just all we do is just get amazing downloads about, I don't know, the meaning of existence or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of it's just practical, you know?
Yeah.
I think especially when people die, they sometimes leave a lot of loose ends and they need to tell somebody about them.
Totally. And it's interesting you talked about your experiences as a kid, because I've recently starting to read a friend's doctorate, and he's Māori and he's written his PhD on matakete, which is like a clairvoyance, and how the medical profession needs to understand it, because it keeps getting misdiagnosed as schizophrenia, or especially Māori people, they're seen as mentally ill when actually they're having a clairvoyant experience, and actually the realisticness of it. And he's actually going to start lecturing at Otago Medical School about it, which is really cool that this is starting to become more integrated. But one of the stories he shares is about a little girl seeing something, and if it was taken to somebody who didn't understand, they would immediately be like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with you. Or they would say, oh, that's just your imagination, don't worry about it. And he's talking about, like what you say, it's really important that there are adults and elders around that can guide young children so that they're safe, you know, so that it doesn't actually turn into mental illness because it's too much. And then two, that it doesn't get suppressed, you know, and then come out in other ways. So interesting.
I feel so lucky to have been born in the family that I was, because I think if I had been born to more mainstream parents, I probably would have been institutionalized.
Yeah.
Or heavily medicated, or both.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Charlie?
Gosh, well, I don't know if I have anything particularly noteworthy. I don't know if I've got, or at least nothing's coming to mind as some, you know, cool spiritual war story.
What's that?
I would say that I said as some spiritual war story.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm like a mediocre psychic. Like, I very frequently will have, like, you know, the vibe of somebody before they call me, you know, or I know when I have like dead friends around, but I can't like converse with them. Yep. And then I have a lot of sort of like synchronicity experiences and experiences of, you know, super helpful divination, you know, or slightly precognitive dreams, or yeah, I think that's where I am at this my stage of spiritual development.
Yeah, I'd say I'm quite similar to you too. I remember also growing up as a kid being so scared of seeing ghosts. Like, there were moments I can remember where I could feel that there was something there, but I prayed so hard to not see what was there. I think part of that was that Christian, well, there was no one around me to help me do that safely. And then I think I'm so scared of that as a child that my angels have been really, I don't know, maybe listened to me and didn't let me see it because I don't think I was quite ready or had the help to be able to do that safely. But I'm like you too, Charlie, that there's lots of things that happen. And I've seen like some UFOs, like those orby things, you know, the orb that people talk about. There was like a period of time where me and my partner at the time had never seen anything like that. And then there was 3 weeks where we saw it together twice, and then each saw something separately. And it all came with like there was a big shift in our own consciousness, and we'd been having some really deep conversations, and we could feel ourselves leveling up. And then as we were having these conversations, these things appeared. And who knows, it could have been some weird military thing that hasn't been discovered or hasn't been exposed, or I don't know, a different dimensional thing. I'm not quite sure what they are, but it was just really interesting. It was almost like a synchronicity. We took it as like the universe being like, yes, this is the right thing for you guys to be thinking about, or I don't know. But I've never seen anything since. But yeah. Yeah, interesting to hear these
There's
things.
a quote from some, I don't know, medicine woman from Mexico. It might have been from a Jodorowsky book that I read this, but the quote was something like, there's so much noise in the spiritual world, like so much going on, that we as humans actually need to be shielded from most of it, because otherwise it would just overwhelm us.
Yeah. And I guess there was a time when we were more clairvoyant and more in touch with that, but we kind of lost, Steiner and lots of other people talk about that we had to be separated from it all so that we can focus on what our individual task is, so otherwise, like you said, we'd just be immersed in the environment all the time and not be able to kind of focus. But it seems like more people are kind of waking up and going, we've come down to this funnel of focusness, and now maybe we're opening back up again.
Yeah, we're like on the upswing out of the Kali Yuga,
Yeah.
I hope so.
I hope so too. So I'll keep an eye on the time here, but I think we're doing all right for our next 40-minute slot. We've kind of discussed it already, but I'm always interested as to how people define or don't define what spiritual path they walk. Some people just say, I'm Christian, or I'm an anthroposophist, or I'm a Buddhist. But then I'm finding more and more people don't like being tied to labels, but still find really interesting ways to describe what it is that they do. And I just wondered if either of you would like to share how you would describe or name what spiritual path you walk.
Yeah, I describe myself as a star poet, an indigenous futurist, and an eclectic magician.
That's cool.
I like that. Thanks. Yeah, I do. I have a lot of practices from various faith traditions that I employ. Most of them, if not all of them, are emergent from ancestral lines that I have. I'm just a very mixed person. And so I carry tarot as a tradition from my father's side of the family, and also his indigenous tribal beliefs, some of which were passed down to me by him, but many of which were learned when I was a little older and kind of reconnecting with tribal practice myself. And I also, I have practiced things like spiritualism and angelic channeling and things that are kind of connected to my ancestral lines. Some shamanism that is kind of connected to the Finns that I am descended from. And I think, I've always been practicing some form of ritual magic. And so I describe myself as an eclectic magician because there are a lot of different forms that I occupy. And then star poetry is my way of describing my preferred approach to astrology, which is basically that I really believe in all of it being equally relevant and kind of equally like immaterial. Like I don't really, I'm not a person who really believes that astrology is like this hard and fast system of rules. I think it's much more poetic and intuitive and kind of luminous and personal. So I like to think of all the different zodiac and house systems as being like different styles of poetry that might resonate with people in the same way that like experimental mid-century Chilean poetry really stirs some people, but others are very inclined toward like the 18th century Scottish like bardic tradition. They're just different types of poetry. There's not one that's like right or wrong. So that's kind of how I relate to it. But the stars have always been a big part of my practice.
Very good. Thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, so I really have two main streams of spiritual research. The first being Western esotericism or Hermeticism, and so Steiner is one big branch of that. But I'm also interested in other forms of the Kabbalah or other, the tarot and sort of the way the Western magical tradition works with the planets. These are all big parts of my path. Sorry, I'm on a chair that's like breaking. So,
Okay. Your microphone's not squeaking anymore or rustling, so that's good.
Great.
Do you need to get in your ear, or are you okay?
I think I'll be okay.
Okay.
It's been breaking for a while, so it's just breaking more.
Well, we'll all be on the edge of our seats. You literally.
So yeah, I'm interested in a number of different aspects of that, and ritual magic as sort of like healing path and a way of connecting to these archetypal spirits. And yeah, and the other path has to do a lot with qigong and with movement traditions. And so I did have one pretty interesting experience while I was in an ashram of followers of Paramahansa Yogananda, who is a wonderful bringer of yoga to the West in sort of mid 1900s. And one of the things that's said about him is that if he's not your guru, he'll show you to your guru. And during my time at that session, or at that retreat center, I had numerous dreams and experiences in meditation that were sort of Tibetan in flavor. And I had this dream that told me I was a part of a Tibetan lineage. And at that same retreat center, I encountered a qigong teacher who I still actually study with. And so his name is Chris Fernie, and he is a teacher of Tai Chi Wu Qigong, which is a sort of Tibetan influenced form of Qigong that basically came through China. And for years, I also studied with another teacher whose lineage traces back through Siberia and Mongolia to Tibet. And yeah, especially because my spiritual journey really deepened and kicked off in relationship to the body and as a healing journey. And also I'm a very serious athlete. I play ultimate frisbee at a really high level. And so the body is a big central focus of my spiritual journey. And yeah, studies and practices within qigong and yoga and Tibetan forms of movement have been are a huge part of that journey for me. Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I think we have a great picture of who you two are, if we can build that in 40 minutes. So thank you for everything that you've shared about your life and adventures. I feel like all of us could have like 5 more podcasts with just each of you two to like elaborate on stuff. It's so interesting. I hope the borders open up soon and I get lots of money so I can travel to actually meet these people in person, like you guys. Come visit and hear some stories. But shall we move on to your work, your project, the book and the course? So I wasn't quite sure what to call the book. Does it have a name yet, or does your course have a name?
Well, we've been usually just calling them like star poetry and then talking about the planet that we're talking about, right? Didn't we just call it Star Poetry Mercury or something like that?
Yeah, this recent class was Star Poetry Mercury Retrograde. And I guess the working title of the book is Star Poetry Mercury.
Okay. So what's the elevator pitch for the book? Is there one?
Do you want to take it, Charlie, or should I?
Sure, I can try. And so this book is introducing an approach to astrology and to star wisdom that we are calling star poetry. And this is a much more fluid way of approaching astrology, which is a sort of reaction to the very regimented, sort of backward gazing approach to astrology, of being really interested in sort of the roots of astrology in Hellenistic traditions or Vedic traditions, and really trying to connect to the spirit of the planets as something that's living and able to be experienced firsthand, and something that has evolved and changed over time and has a peculiar expression today. And so Mercury is the sort of planet that we're focusing on as a really wonderful sort of like case study of this approach to astrology, and as also a sort of like patron saint of this approach to astrology. Mercury is this really interesting archetypal character who's been very present in, you know, a number of different cultures and has been an inspiration to a number of different people throughout the ages. And that spirit is not something that can be codified or captured in one set of rules or practices. It's something very dynamic, and it changes with the spirit of the times. And so, yeah, the goal of the book is really to help people connect to that spirit, and to understand how it plays out in their personal life through their astrology chart, but even more generally, just to be able to experience it as a living presence in their life. So yeah, I think that's a working elevator pitch.
I think I would probably say something like Star Poetry Mercury is an unofficial biographical fanzine of everybody's favorite secret guardian, gossip queen, and messenger of all sorts of like fame, volatility, excitement, an introduction to a very fascinating and very exciting character who wreaks all sorts of delightful mischief throughout history and in our personal lives.
Nice. So that's a great way to describe it. So
Awesome.
is it written more as a workbook, or like you say, is it like a something that you just read through, like an info zine thing?
It's a bit of both. We have some invocations and some exercises related to finding Mercury's placement in your own chart and understanding how Mercury might interplay with the rest of your planets or your sort of approach to life. But then we also just have a lot of like historical and kind of like pop culture correlations. You know, we talk about Mercury appearing in various famous people's charts and events in history and like art movements and all kinds of things that we've just kind of like cobbled together in the course of better understanding this being. One of the things I'm most excited about is actually a recent conversation that we had about Mercury's kind of correlation with trickster energies. And that's something that I don't always see widely discussed in astrological movements. I've been super excited the past few years to see more people using they and them pronouns for Mercury, because I find this to be a very gender fluid, very slippery identity that this being tries on. And so this is a bit of a like maybe a queerer presentation of Mercury than is typical. But yeah, very kind of like exciting, hopefully, and fun, because those are two things that Mercury really appreciates. The Saturn book will not be anywhere near as fun.
So are you planning on doing a series for each of the planets?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So this will be, have you started writing any of the other ones, or have you just been focused on Mercury at the moment? Or is it kind of a long thing, you're doing it all at the same time?
We're focusing on Mercury for sure, but we've been sort of gathering notes.
Yeah.
And so our method in this has largely been that Olivia and I have conversations about Mercury, and then I get those transcribed and sort of distill them and make them edit them up, and then we also are, you know, working on other projects at the same time. And so when content comes up for each of those planets, so for example, Olivia just did a class on Venus and Mars, and Venus is going to have a pretty intense retrograde this winter, and so we'll be doing a class on Venus, and at the same time probably start working on the Venus book.
Wow. So do you think at some point you'll release them all in like a big compendium book, or are you going to do them all like little?
My dream is to have like a very beautiful box set. I envision them as having like different colored spines and making a little rainbow. And so people can just like pull out the sun or the moon or whatever they need.
Yeah.
I think we'll release them one at a time, and then maybe once that's all done, we'll put them together. But I personally want them to be in a box set rather than one volume, because I love the idea that they are kind of separable.
Yeah, that feels right. I can see it now. It's going to happen. They'll be beautiful. It's good that, so I mean, what was it that inspired you to start this? I can kind of imagine, given everything that you've told me about your relationship, but was there like a inspirational moment where you were like, we got to write a book or lots of books?
I have no idea how we landed on Mercury.
Well, we landed on Mercury because, so I had dreams that we were publishing books about the planets under the name Pepper and Cross, which is our last names. So that's sort of what we go by, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what we'll go by here. And it's a fantastic name. And I had like a logo in my mind when I woke up one day, and it was just like everything was perfect. And I knew we were going to do all the planets and several of the asteroids. And we started talking about which one we should do first. I mean, we had been meeting and just riffing on whatever was on our minds astrologically, but then we wanted to focus in a little more. And I think we chose Mercury. Well, they chose us, really. Like, I think that's what happened. I think we were like, where should we start? And Mercury was like, with me, obviously.
Yeah.
Also worth mentioning, Olivia has like the best pedigree of any person on Earth to work with Mercury, I think, because they literally took the middle name Mercury for 9 years, and had this devotional relationship to Mercury, and so that's a part of what that story is part of what we share in the book. And yeah, you should say a few words about that, Olivia.
I didn't grow up with a middle name, and I have a really interesting relationship with names overall. The name that I go by now, which is Olivia in the anglicized version, or Elfe, which is like the Celtic pronunciation. There's a million different pronunciations. People say Ilva, Elfie, Elve, like all different ways. But that name was like given to me by the air when I was like 20 years old. And I took on the name Mercury somehow, just intuitively. I mean, I guess I had started thinking about, as a reporter and as somebody who was also trained in medicine and as somebody who is a poet, all of those things kind of combined under like mercurial rule for me. But I felt like I really wanted Mercury to, I don't know, I wanted to have this like devotional relationship. So I took the name Mercury, understanding that Mercury governed names, and I wanted to strengthen Mercury in my own life, which I think, given that I have Mercury in the 12th house, which is maybe a difficult placement, I think it was a good call to do that. And so I just started working with Mercury in my own very private way. This was during the time that I wasn't really open about a lot of my spiritual practices, but I was really working with Mercury in this kind of like symbolic approach. I did a lot of like writing anonymous poems and leaving them at city intersections and taking little gifts to particular places that seemed very Mercury ruled, and trying to like learn how to manage the vast influx of spiritual information that I'm kind of always receiving, and just how to align it and use it appropriately. So yeah, I knew that I would be doing this for some like multiple of 3, because of that being an aspect of Mercury. And so it ended up being, I actually had the name for 12 years. I said I was going to take it for 9, but I didn't choose another one until 12. So I kind of closed my practice, and then eventually took my next middle name from a dream, which is Ephraim. But yeah, so I'm just kind of like working with Mercury, and I've had some really, Charlie has seen the footage. Do you want to just, you've seen the footage of Mercury appearing in my class? It's very strange. There's like, it's like a Zoom video like this, my face. And then out of nowhere, there's this like dancing, inexplicable light that's very bright and comes in and is like dancing across my face, dancing on the wall behind me. And I'm saying to the class, like, do you see this? Do you see this happening? Like, I can't even, it's hard to believe it, but it's like right when I'm talking about my devotion to Mercury, this light just like comes in and starts flickering all over. And we never found out what it was. I mean, it looks like it could have been like a mirror half a block away catching the light and coming into my window. But the serendipity was pretty beautiful.
And then you had the visitation from Mercury a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting. Powerful
stuff. Do you remember that other one?
Which one are you
so
talking?
I have
so many.
So you, it was the middle of the night and a light appeared in your room, and you were like, am I dreaming this? But the cats were also freaking out. And then you asked it if it was like this giggly presence. It's like this presence that was like amused by you. And you were like terrified, and it was like, thought that was funny.
Yes.
And then you said, if you're Mercury, you can come closer. And then that happened. And you had this sense that Mercury like wanted to be amused, wanted to be entertained. Yeah,
the light like came onto my bed, the other side of my bed that I wasn't in, like flickered across my pillow. And I definitely felt like Mercury was like, entertain me. I'm here to like be entertained.
I'm trying to sleep. Leave me alone. That's so funny. How interesting. We've been talking about what inspired the book, and Olivia, you've been sharing some stories about how Mercury has been in your life, and why you chose to do Mercury first. So, and we've looked at what the book could be. So what is the course element that you're offering as well?
Well, we recently taught a class together, Mercury Retrograde Intensive, which was during the last cycle of Mercury Retrograde. And it also, coincided with this significant eclipse that took place, and I don't even remember exactly how we decided. We just were talking about it and decided we should do a course, and then offered it, and then had a wonderful cohort of students, very dedicated and bright and curious people. And we've even begun offering dual chart interpretations, which is really exciting, where people come and they see both me and Charlie about their natal charts, and we do that interpretation simultaneously and alternately. But yeah, we taught this. It was 6 weeks long, but a total of 3 classes. So we met every 2 weeks, and we checked in basically at the beginning of the retrograde, at the height of the retrograde, and then just after the retrograde had ended. And we led people through a kind of like personal ritual associated with integrating the retrograde within their chart specifically, right? So wherever it was in their chart, it was bringing up different things, and we helped them to develop and devise a ritual that would assist them with finding the maximum potential in that particular planetary motion. And then we'll be doing another one again, which is going to be sort of a similar structure, but the energy will be very different when Mercury goes retrograde next. And we're also going to be offering a Venus retrograde intensive together as well.
Nice. So when does Mercury go into retrograde next?
What is the next cycle?
It's late September. Yeah. It's late September and through the first chunk of October.
Right around the equinox. So it's going to be sort of much more of a feeling, I think, of it'll be September 26th, I think, is the day it goes retrograde. We'll probably start the class right around the equinox, and then it'll go through some pretty interesting territory. The rest of the stars Mars will be in Libra at that time, and Mars is fairly challenged in Libra, so there'll be some intersection between those two. The messenger going back to like take care of Mars while he's limping along in a sign that he hates to be in. And we'll probably be dealing with some themes of, like, I would imagine, forgiveness, justice, balance, and equanimity. There's a lot of Libra, and then there will also be some really significant squares to Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. So that'll be a pretty strong energy to navigate as well. Or sorry, trines.
Mm-hmm. So when does the Venus retrograde happen? Is that later?
Yeah, Venus retrograde
December.
starts. Yeah, it's in December, and it begins on, let's see. Do you know, Charlie?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know the sort of ramp up to it even starts in November. And so the reason that it'll be such a big one is that Venus will be in a conjunction with Pluto right at the beginning of it. And Pluto is sort of the one of the more challenging planets, especially in dealing with things that might not even obvious challenges, like challenges that might be hard to understand or see, or things that feel even, shadowy or hard to look at. And so Venus meeting Pluto in some ways is like a recapitulation even of the Persephone story of sort of an abduction myth, or a journey to the underworld story. And so it'll be a powerful one.
Cool.
Yeah. And these retrogrades, I think they're really wonderful times to come closer in contact with each of these planetary spirits. Especially Mercury, people have such a quick, like, Mercury retrograde, like it's a sort of meme of writing something off, or and that's such a surface level way of relating to what's going on. And even within the retrograde, there's such a different energy between the first part of the retrograde, or even before the retrograde starts, and then the latter part of it. And so a lot of hope within these classes is to use it as a time to get closer to this divine messenger, and also to sort of get a rhythm of understanding how these retrogrades unfold. And so the hope is even that, we're even inviting people back from the first class to continue with us for the second one, but for people to get a sense of sort of how these retrograde motions unfold in the chart, and how they can work with them.
Nice. So how can people register to be part of the course?
I guess follow us on Instagram, or I've got a Substack that I have, a little email newsletter that people could follow. Olivia's got.
I have a website. It's www.schoolforallages.com, which is the name of the house that I grew up in. And also kind of a funny coincidence. I understand Steiner has something of all the ages, or there's some Western esotericism of all ages thing that I don't know very much.
It's actually Manly P. Hall.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
the Secret Wisdom of All the Ages, right?
Yeah, that book. Yeah.
So someone told me once that I was clearly like the reincarnation of Manly P. Hall, and I don't know anything about that, and I just don't know. Anyway, I don't think I would admit it if I was, so that's fine. But that's my website, and you can sign up for my newsletter, and I'll announce the class there.
Very cool. I'll put all that information in the show notes. And do you have an idea of when your book's going to be released? And will it be released as an ebook or as a physical thing?
Well, we're hoping that it'll be a physical thing. We have a couple of publishers that we are thinking about pitching to. I don't think we'll have any trouble getting it published at all. And it's probably about, what do you think, Charlie, 80% finished?
Yeah, we're basically at cleaning up the draft. And so, so the first draft will be done, in the next few weeks, and then it'll be this sort of publishing process. And I who knows? That could actually. I've been told that once you think you're almost done publishing a book, it's there's actually a whole like a whole other journey. So we'll see if it very well could be next year when it actually comes
It's
out.
probably Mercury is just conjunct my North Node right now, so I'm just like everything's great. Anyway, destiny, it's fine. It'll all work out.
It will work out. And I guess if people are following you on social media, then they'll keep abreast of how the book's going, and doing those courses with you, I'm sure will be a nice build up to it. Yeah. So is there anything else you want to share before we say goodbye?
Gosh. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm wearing my land back earrings today, and we've been having a lot of off recording conversations about Indigenous politic and practice. And so I think I'll just say that I really hope that everyone who is listening is finding a way to be in a good way with your own ancestors and with the land guardians of wherever it is that you are listening or watching from.
Yes, thank you. Charlie?
You know, it occurs to me that we could end with the moon language poem, since we mentioned it earlier.
Oh yeah, I used to have it perfectly memorized. Do you have it memorized, Charlie?
I think I could probably do it. So the term moon language comes from a Hafiz poem, and I'll try for it. And if I mess up, we'll have it in the show notes or something.
Yeah.
Anyways, admit something. Everyone you see, you say to them, "Love me." Of course, you do not say this out loud. Otherwise, someone would call the cops. Think about this, though, this great draw in us to connect. Why not be the one who lives with a full moon in each eye, saying what each other eye in this world is saying with that sweet moon language, what each other eye in this world is dying to hear.
You did it.
I did
it.
Yay!
It. Well, thank you so much for being here today in the different time zones. I really appreciate the effort and your openness to share. You're both beautiful people doing beautiful work. And I hope that we can connect again at other levels and at other stages. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Likewise, Amanda. This is fantastic.
Yeah, good times.